This month, what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to do one of our heart blocks right here. We're going to go over it. I'm going to show you how you can use some of the basic tools, and you don't have to do anything. Just open the block and you're ready to go. So let's switch over and bring up this program. Here we go. All right. So now we have Design N Quilt right here. And this is the program. Some of you might own some of the other softwares, but this is just Design N Quilt. And what we're going to use first is our basic blocks that are already created. So when you look along the top row, let's just touch a little bit of base right here. We have a new page, what gives you a blank work page, an open folder, a save. The next one you're going to use is this little icon right here. I did not realize how much I was going to use print preview before doing anything. It's an amazing little tool. And then today what we're going to use, if you look at these two yellow blocks right here, their first one's called Quilt Block Library, and the next one is Quilt Library. The difference is Quilt Block is a block, Quilt Library is completed quilts. So let's click on Quilt Block Library to begin with. Quilt Block Library, this is where there's a bunch of quilt blocks already in the program for you, but there's also a title right here that says My Blocks. When you click on this, yours will be empty, but as you create blocks, you're going to see they're going to show up automatically every time you create a block inside your block library. But what we're going to use today is we're going to come down and we're going to go down to Potpourri. Here we go. And we're going to use the first heart. Now, this is, in case you're following along and you want to do this with your software, it is under Potpourri, and it is the third one in. So 003, Design 003, and I'm going to click on it. This is the block that I showed you, but this is the block that we want to learn some features of, and we want to change it. So what we're going to do first off is I want you to see that these are half square triangles and squares, and that's all that's in this basic block right here. But I want to change the background. Now, in the future, we will be adding our own fabrics, we'll be changing fabrics, we'll be doing all kinds of things like that. But what I want to do for now is we're just going to use some built-ins so you can play with this too. When you click on a piece of your block, and this one I did the upper left-hand corner triangle, and you can tell because it has the blue around that piece of the block right there, around that triangle. Now, when I left click on it, all right, it's highlighted. Now I want to do some changing, and this might happen to you, and I've just noticed this. If you look down at the bottom, my charts here are missing. I'm missing my fabric charts. So what I'm going to do, and this is what you can do for yourself as well, is you come up to toolbars, and when you left click and come down to reset workspace, it's all the way at the bottom. Now take a look down here. You can see I only have a few icons, but look what happens when I come to reset workspace. Everything else comes back. So if you're ever missing anything here, or maybe you accidentally close out your properties or your sequence view right here and you close them out by mistake, you can always go to toolbars, reset workspace, and it'll bring everything back. So no need to panic. That's one of the most common things that happens is you accidentally close it because maybe you didn't realize where the mouse pointer was and you click something off. That's okay. It's easy to get back. Another shortcut that I want to show you is when you have your block here and you're missing part of it, and you kind of want to zoom it out so you can see the whole thing. Here's another shortcut. Come over to the magnifying glass, and when you double left click, it'll bring everything onto screen. Yes, you can come up to the zoom icon and you can use all that, but you need to know the percentage. Like this is at 172%. I'd have been guessing, but this is super easy. Just double click on the magnifying glass and it'll bring anything in. Also, if you have ever done something like this, let me just exaggerate it, and you're going, where did my block go? I know I have a block. I can't see it here, but I can see it here. All you do have to do again is come over to your magnifying glass and double click, and it'll come back on the screen for you. It's a great way to find something if you accidentally drag your hand over your touchpad and you can't find what you were looking for. It disappeared off the screen. All right, so again, I want to select my block. Now, here's something that's different as well. You see my select tool over on the left is grayed out. It is because I am in my block library, I can use my selection tools here, my piece select or my lasso. And I'm going to use my piece select so that I can click on that one corner right there. Exactly how you get to it. Now that I have my workspace reset, I can come down to the lower left, and when you hover, this is where your commands will come up, and they're going to tell you, expand your pop-up palette. And when you left click, it pops up for me. Now I can take my palette and I can move it wherever I want to move it out of the way, move it over, move it down, wherever you want to move it, you can bring up your palette. Now, I'm going to scroll this over just a little bit because I want to see my whole heart right here. So I'll just move it over like this a little bit out of the way. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to change this color here. And let's say I want to make it a yellow color. I can click on yellow. It does one piece. Now I'm going to use another tool that you're going to use a lot of, and that's up here at the top. There's two arrows. One is undo and one is redo. You can undo all the way back to a blank screen. And then you can redo. As long as you don't change anything, you can redo all the way back to where you were. I'm going to undo. This time in selecting just the one, I'm going to right click now on that same triangle. And I'm going to say, select the same in block by, if I say color and shape, watch what happens. And I click on that yellow. It did not pick up my bottom two corners because they are not triangles, they're squares. So I'm going to click undo. Click on that same upper left-hand triangle. I'm going to right click, and this time I'm going to say select by color. Now when selecting by color and I click on that same yellow, I've changed the background around my heart. So let's go back and let's show you the other option. On that same triangle, if I right click and I say select the same in the block by shape, look what happens to this one when I click on yellow. I will now get part of the heart because there are triangles in the heart as well. So I'm going to undo. And the one that I wanted was to select by color. So again, I right clicked on the triangle. I'm going to come down and I'm going to select by color. And I'll select the yellow. Now, I want to see it with fabric. So on your pop-up, this is your pop-up palette that we brought up. Remember, you can move it all around. And I'm going to, here it says palette, I'm going to click on fabrics. Now we put fabrics in here, but only a few, because fabrics, after a while, they're no longer available and you can't get them. So we wanted you to have just a few to play with, like dots, stripes. We have some of Hope Yoder's in here, Moda fabric, you know, leather and lace. Those are kind of fun too. They have some fun things in here. And all you do is you come over and you click on it, and it's going to pop up a window or open up the fabrics that are in that line. So you can scroll down and you can see all of these fabrics. Okay. And let's just pick on this green right here. It's immediately in there. And at first I'm thinking, well, you know, that doesn't look like the fabric. Well, I have to look at the fabric and look at my size of my block. My block is only a 4-inch block. So my fabric, yes, that is going to be the size it's going to be. I recommend when you're doing 4-inch blocks, when you're first learning, to use your palette, which is this selection right here, over on the left underneath the pop-up palette window. It says palette. And I recommend using colors to begin with, especially when you're doing a small square like this. I mean, each one of these half square triangles, if you look over here, the width and the height of those squares, they're 1 inch. So they're very small currently. All right. So when you're doing something small, stick with your palette, your solid colors to learn. Now, yes, we can change it to the fabrics, and you can do that in the future too. But for today, we're just going to use the solid colors. All right. Let me click off of this. To close it, you just click on close. So let's say this is my block. And we've already discovered that right here, it tells me the total size. That's from left to right, top to bottom, is 4 inches by 4 inches. Here is where our print preview comes in. We're going to come up to the top left-hand corner. And right at the top, when you hover over it, it says print preview. It looks like a little printer with like paper on it. Left click on it, and it's going to open a pop-up window. Now, this pop-up window is where you get to come in and you can decide, what do you want to see? Okay, I want it to print my block so I know what my block looks like. I have something to refer to. Include the grid lines, include my color numbers, or do I want the outline only? For now, I'm going to leave that one off. We'll come back to that. I'm also looking right here at my fabric width. Most fabrics are 44 inches wide. Minimum cut, I'm saying half a yard. Okay. All my cut pieces, I'm saying, are a half a yard by 44 inches wide. And increase it at 4.50 every time. I'm sorry, 4.5 inches every time if you need more fabric. Right? So it'll make sense when we start doing larger quilts. But for now, I'm going to say the width is a half yard or 15 or 0.50, and it's 44 inches in the height. All right. Do I want my piece analysis? Do I want to know what my pieces look like? I'm going to say yes. Print my fabric summary. Tell me my fabric. Include a seam allowance. And here you can change this. If you want to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance instead of a 1/4 inch, you can do that as well. We're not doing foundation piecing. So I am going to, I don't need to print the actual sizes, but what I want is I want it to print my cutting instructions. I'm going to click OK. Before I do that, you would have print the block, include the grid lines, and in the color numbers for the fabric, for the squares inside, print your piece analysis, print your fabric summary, and include the seam allowance, and give me my printing instructions. I'm going to say OK. What you're going to notice about the block right away is, do you see the numbers 1 and 2 right there? Well, what that is from, that is telling you that fabric 1 is the light pink, fabric 2 is the dark pink. And if you're not really sure what the numbers are, when you start looking at the next pages, and I'm going to come right up here to the left-hand corner of the screen where it says print, and to the right of that, it says next page. I'm going to left click on it and it shows me the next page. Piece analysis is going to show me I'm going to have 8 triangles of light pink, 6 squares of the magenta, 8 triangles of the magenta, and 2 squares of the light pink. And it gives me sizes. When I go to the next one, it tells me that I need an 1/8 of a yard and an 1/8 of a yard of each color to make this block. When I go to the next one, oh, let me back up one. So color 1 was the light pink, color 2 was the magenta. So when we were back here on the first page, color 1 is the light pink, color 2 is the magenta. So let me go down to the next page. Now it tells me how to cut it. So let's zoom in a little bit here so you can see this. The first color, it says color number 1, and I'm saying light pink. They call it Rosetta. I'm going to need 10 pieces. We're going to cut one strip of 1 7/8 by 44 inches wide. Then we're going to cut 4 squares of 1 7/8. We're going to subcut those 4 squares diagonally in one direction only to get 8 half square triangles of 1 7/8. And then it's telling me keep your leftovers to do step 2. On step 2, it says from the leftovers of step 1, cut one strip of 3 1/2 inches and subcut 2 squares of 1/2 inches. That will give you the 2 squares. The 1 in step 1 gave you the 8 triangle pieces. All right. Step 2, from the the next color, we already did step 2. The next one, step 1, from color number 2, the magenta, we're going to have a total of 14 pieces. We're going to have 8 triangles and we're going to have 6 squares. You're going to cut one strip of 1 7/8 by 44. That's our width. And we're going to subcut 4 squares of 1 7/8. We're going to take those 4 squares diagonally in one direction only. We're going to cut them in half to get 8 half square triangles. That will give us our 8 pieces here. Keep the leftovers for step 2. In step 2, it says from the leftovers, we're going to cut one strip of 9 1/2 inches and subcut 6 squares of 1/2 inches. So out of that 9 by 1/2, we're going to cut 6 squares of 1/2 inches. So that gives me all my cutting instructions. I have my map layout. Let me go back in there. So I have my map layout. I know where I'm going to put my triangles. I know how I'm going to sew them together. And this is just a basic heart. And doing the 4 inches, this is going to give us our small block. Now, what if I want a larger block? I want a 12-inch block. I've shown you all the measurements and everything for the small 4-inch block, but look what happens if you come over here to the right where it says total size, 4 inches by 4 inches. And if all I do is change it to 12 inches, did you notice how everything changed automatically? And the squares are now, this piece right here is 3 inches. I'm going to click apply. I'm going to double click because now I got to zoom out so I can see my block. It's still the same block, but look what happens when I come up here to print preview now. I'm going to leave everything the same. I'm just going to look at it. My block still has 2 colors, 1 and 2. I go to the next one, same amount of pieces. The sizes are now different. My yardage, I can still get it out of 1/8 of a yard. But look at my cutting piece size. We were doing 1 7/8 squares. They are now 3 7/8. All the cutting measurements are telling me everything I need to do, just like we did on the first one. But look how fast all of the math was done for me. The other thing to notice, and I didn't point it out on the first one, is if you look across the top, it tells me where I got the design. I'm on page 4 of 4 cutting instructions, and this is based on 44-inch wide fabric with a minimum cut length of 0.5 inches. Includes 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is amazing. Here we go. Here's all of our pieces. Everything is here for us. All right. Let me close this out. So that's how we could create this block. Let me come back here. Now, so that was the little 4-inch block. But when I made those changes, here's my 12-inch block. Look how much bigger it got. All I did was change that size. So this is not like other programs. You can start with any size artwork, any size square, and then just change one little thing, and you now have everything for a larger square. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoy your first block party. There was a lot of detail in this one, but as we get going, our blocks are going to get bigger, better, and more information.